There was a slight chill in the evening air. The sun had set, and the silence of the cemetery spread everywhere. Even the birds and animals had disappeared somewhere. A woman named Sadaf often passed this way, because it was the shortest way to her house. She had always heard that it was not good to pass through the cemetery at night. But that day, something happened that changed her life. At the corner of the cemetery, she heard a soft sob, as if a child was crying softly. Sadaf's steps stopped involuntarily. When she put her ear to it, the sound of crying became clearer. She looked carefully in the darkness and saw a small child sitting and shivering near the grave. His clothes looked old and torn, as if they were from many years ago. Sadaf carefully approached and said in a soft voice, "Son, what happened? Why are you here alone?" The child slowly raised his head. His eyes were big and full of tears. He said in a low voice, "Can you take me home?" Sadaf's heart ached. She understood that this child might have lost his way. She went closer and held his hand and said, "Yes, son, I will drop you home. But tell me where your house is." The child slowly gave an address. Sadaf was shocked and thought that this neighborhood was really close. She took him with her and started walking. On the way, the child was completely silent. His eyes kept looking here and there in the darkness, as if he was looking for something. Sadaf tried to talk to him several times, but he only answered in small sentences. When the two reached that address, an old house stood there. The walls were rotten and the windows were half broken. Sadaf said in surprise, "This is your house." The child just nodded and stood near the door. Sadaf tried to push the door, but it was rusty and looked as if it had not been opened for many years. A strange fear began to rise in Sadaf's heart, but she kept telling herself that perhaps this was the old house of the child's relatives. The child suddenly turned around, smiled, and said, "Thank you," then slowly disappeared into the darkness of the door. Sadaf felt as if he had dissolved into thin air. Her heart started beating fast. She quickly went back home and kept thinking that perhaps this was all a product of her illusion. The next morning, when Sadaf opened the newspaper with her tea, her eyes widened. There was a big news. The child who had mysteriously disappeared 50 years ago is still visible to people in the cemetery. The news was accompanied by an old black and white photo. Sadaf's hands started shaking. The photo was of the same child she had brought with her last night. His clothes, his face, everything was exactly the same. Sadaf's breathing stopped. She dropped the newspaper from her hand and sat down, leaning against the wall. The same sentence was echoing in her mind over and over again. "Can you take me home?" Suddenly, she felt a slight rustling near the door of the room. She looked up in fear. A small shadow stood in the darkness. It was the same child. There was a strange empty gleam in his eyes. The child slowly entered the room and whispered, "You promised." Sadaf's lips began to tremble. She tried to move back, but her steps seemed to be connected to the ground. The child was getting closer. A cold wind spread in the room. The windows started to rattle loudly. Sadaf said in a trembling voice, "I had left you at home." A terrible smile appeared on the child's face. The skin on his face slowly began to decompose, as if he had actually come out of the grave. His eye sockets became empty, and he began to take the form of a skeleton. "This was not my home," he said in a raspy voice. "My home is a grave, and you did not take me back there." Sadaf tried to scream, but no sound came out of his throat. The child, or whatever was no longer a child, had come very close to him. Its cold hand grabbed Sadaf's hand. In an instant, all of Sadaf's energy seemed to have been drained. In the morning, when the neighbors knocked on Sadaf's door, there was no answer. When they went inside, Sadaf was lying lifeless on the floor, her eyes wide open and a look of fear on her face. The newspaper was writing in the next news story that day. Another woman saw the missing child, and she never came back. The cemetery is still there, and people are still afraid to go near it at night, because sometimes a small voice echoes there. "Can you take me home?"